Hi, Tammy. Are we having 2 meetings a month this coming year or only one?
I'm sorry, Jim, can you
I just
repeat
haven't
that?
figured it out.
I like give it just a few seconds here. Okay, here we go. Good evening. The December 8th, 2022 Whatcom County Planning Commission meeting is called to order. I'll call the roll. Let me know if you're here. Robert Bartel. Here. Kelvin Barton, that's me. I'm here. Atul Desmani. Atul Desmani. Okay. Jim Hansen.
Here.
Stephen Jackson. Stephen Jackson. Okay. Julie Jefferson.
Here.
Thank you. Kimberly Lund.
Here.
Dominic Masseri.
Here.
Scott Van Dalen.
Here.
All right. Thank you. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God, indivisible, liberty and justice
No, I hit it, but instead of the flag coming up, the screen came up, even though I clicked on the flag.
Well,
That-
all right. All right, so now is the time for department update, and that'll be our assistant planning director, Steve Robert. So Steve, go ahead.
Thanks. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. You guys have sent forward a recommendation for wireless code here a while back, and that's been adopted by the council. You also sent forward a recommendation on Noble Lands with some changes. That's still under consideration by the council. It's in the planning development committee, so they're considering. Depending what happens tonight, we may cancel our January, our first meeting of January. We don't have a second one in December because of Christmas holidays. And so but we may have, we also cancel our first January one.
Thank you. So now is time open session for public comment. Tammy, planning commission coordinator, would you take over?
Okay, looks like there are no attendees. So, but basically for the good of those here, I'll just like say welcome to the meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live. The audio is being recorded and will be posted to the county website. As noted on our website, members of the public can watch the meeting or join online or by phone. So there are no attendees.
Thank you. So now is the time for commissioner comments. Commissioner comments. Not seeing any hands come up, so let's go ahead to approval of minutes from the October 27th meeting.
Jim Hansen has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hampton, go ahead.
No problem. I just put it up at the last second. I'm still trying to figure out what our schedule is for next year because we got an email that seemed to indicate it was only on the third, or was it third or fourth Thursday anyway, or of the month. And I was used to having 2 a month. Does that mean we'll only be having a 1 a month next year?
Well, I think, go ahead.
There's actually 2 a month, the second and fourth Thursday, just as always, except for August, November, and December. There should have been 2 calendar invitations, one for the second Thursday of the month and the other for the fourth Thursday of the month. But I can resend them both to you to be
No
checked.
worries. I'll mark them both on my planner.
Okay,
Okay, so now let's move on to approval of minutes from October 27th.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes from the October 27, 2022 planning committee meeting.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Right, are there any additions or corrections? Hearing that there are no additions or corrections, Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
okay. Commissioner Jefferson? Commissioner Jefferson? You're first this time, and you're muted.
Sorry, I'm trying to get my mute off. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lund?
Yes.
Commissioner Mosseri?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Dalen?
Abstain, absent.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes,
Commissioner Hanson?
Yes.
Mr. Bart?
Yes.
Okay, so that is 1, 2, 3, 6 yeses. So that carries.
Okay, so on our agenda tonight is the miscellaneous code amendments. also known as Code Scrub. And Cliff, I understand you're presenting.
I am. Good evening, commissioners. Long time no see. So as you just mentioned, oops, where'd my little cheat sheet go? I'm with PDS, and we also have Amy Keenan in attendance to answer any implementation questions. So as your chair mentioned, we have before you tonight our annual miscellaneous code amendments or code scrub, wherein we, work on grammar and fixing, clarifying code and fixing inconsistencies, sometimes a few minor policy issues. This year, we're proposing amendments to titles 20 zoning, 21 land division, and 22 land use and development. Now, I'm not going to explain every single one of them to you, as the staff report does that, and I don't want to waste your time going over things you understand. However, I'm going to go through them in order of the staff report and just see if anybody has questions about those, and we'll talk specifically about ones the commission has questions about. Does that sound appropriate? Okay. And let me go ahead and start sharing my screen too, so it's up there. All right. The first item is to require written concurrence from agencies with jurisdiction regarding building heights around airports. Basically, this would require applicants to submit their plans if they're near the airport for concurrence with the FAA or airport staff that it meets the Part 77 imaginary surface height restrictions. Do we have any questions or comments about that? Hearing none, I'll move on.
Wait, has got his hand.
All right. I know this won't have any impact, but just the concept of a imaginary surface was a little beguiling to me. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. They model airports based on the alignments of the runway, what kind of planes you're going to be coming in, and what it does is it creates kind of, if you imagine a stadium where it's flat in the middle, but then the seats kind of rise up like this, so it's a curve, but it's unique to every airport. And we have adopted that map. It's in our comp plan, but it's not very, it's not very legible, and staff has a really hard time, confirming that a proposed building is not 6 inches over what that is. So they've asked that we just require the applicants send it over to the airport for concurrence and let them read their maps. The point being, we don't want airplanes hitting the tops of buildings.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Number 2 is a policy change, and this is to require overflow parking for certain residential developments using private roads. So we're having a lot more subdivisions and multifamily, residential units being built on private roads, and public works standards don't really cover those in terms of parking. There are no parking requirements. So you can imagine a short plat or a small plat that only has 2 parking spaces for each person or each house and no place to park otherwise. So we're getting more and more parking problems in these and some of the multifamily uses. So staff has required that we just add to the parking space requirements in 3 places for duplexes, multifamily, and single family, if they're on a private road, to have overflow parking. I see a hand raised.
Pretty soon I'm going to run out of questions, but
Or breath.
yeah, I've been getting in shape. But okay, will they still have the same impervious surface requirements under this provision and that they had before this provision was made.
So private roads, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, private roads can be paved, but they don't necessarily need to be, except if it's over a certain number of units.
So Amy Keenan, Planning and Development Services. For the most part, what we're talking about here is for developments within the urban growth area. So for those, we are talking about projects that would be required to have paved roads. And the road section may be a little bit larger with required parking. However, what we're finding right now is that even if we don't provide for on-street parking, people are doing it anyway. So this allows us to require that people provide for parking on the road and provide it safely for pedestrians and access purposes.
And what we're proposing is just one overflow space for every 2 units of these different types. So a lot of times, like if you go to an apartment complex or condo complex, you'll see, everybody has assigned spaces, but then there's guest parking. That's essentially what this is.
Right, Commissioner Lund.
I'm wondering if staff can speak to how this proposed change gels with the Whatcom Housing Authority, which I know members of I'm not sure who, but I know the county was a participating member. There was I was looking at a final draft report about parking policy and housing affordability in Whatcom County, and this seems to be very much misaligned with the direction and recommendations for doing away with parking, mandatory minimum parking requirements as a strategy to increase housing affordability. In addition, so I can speak further about, this seems to be at odds with that report that was part of the Whatcom Housing Authority. So I'm wondering if staff can speak to that.
I didn't see that report, but I get the gist of it. And I think that stuff works really well in downtown areas where, there is parking. But, and Amy can attest, there are lots of things going in now where people are just parked, sort of in the road, because the roads themselves, the public or private roads that they put in are 24 feet. So it's basically 2 driving lanes with no space for cars on the side. And so if every unit only has 2 spaces, like in a single family development, where do their guests park?
Mm-hmm.
Or if they have more than 2 cars, say they have 5 kids and each have a car.
I guess I would also add that most of our development in the urban growth area occurs either in the Columbia Valley, Kendall area, or in Birch Bay, Linden. We really don't have growth in the urban growth area regarding the city of Bellingham. So what we're finding is both Birch Bay and Columbia Valley do not have an adequate transit system or pedestrian trails, or any way to get people to where they need to go. So unfortunately, I think that perhaps as transit and pedestrian access becomes more available in these areas, we should definitely look at this parking situation. But what we're finding is that people are parking in fire truck turnarounds. They're parking in areas in front of fire hydrants. So if we can actually enforce that and look at it and make sure that it's striped appropriately, we can hopefully take care of those concerns, acknowledging that in general, in planning purposes, we don't want more parking spaces.
Yeah, personally, I agree with that policy in an urban area where there are alternative transportation. More and more people are riding bikes and walking and that kind of thing. But out in the areas Amy mentioned, there just isn't that alternative.
Right. I agree that everything that staff is bringing up is an issue. But I focused on the part in the report that looked at suburban surface lots, and they estimate the cost per additional space is between $3,400 to $20K based on the land price. And so they are saying that that can be up to $250 a month increase in rent for individuals when those costs are amortized and factors in. And when we have a housing affordability crisis, it went into the like exponential increases in stormwater runoff. And I think there's a lot of unintended consequences that seems to be more than just a code scrub. Like, I think we might want to think carefully through what this would mean. So I'm a little cautious about this one section. This was my main concern tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions?
No,
So I agree with Commissioner Lund fully, and I was looking at, could we make this a little smaller? And also, is this compatible with the cities or the areas that this is next to? Meaning, and I know Bellingham, and I'm not sure they have this, but I was unaware of the Columbia Valley, Birch Bay problems, but hearing what you said, that all makes sense. And then the other piece that I was thinking about with this, is there a mechanism in place if there's nearby parking, say within 500 feet, so that the developer can be exempt from putting these in? Or is this just automatic?
Nearby parking as on other or public streets or parking garages or?
Yeah, correct. And, like, you imagine there's a lane or something coming off a public street, there's lots of parking there. The houses are 200 feet away. Would it be a way to where they can opt out of this?
I suppose that could be built into it. We haven't, but it could be.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it should be. I was just wondering if there was an established mechanism.
I can't think of anything. Can you, Amy?
No, we do have provisions in our parking section to allow you to work with offsite parking as long as it's within, I think it's 700 feet of your primary use. The problem is, and we allow that for examples where people have uses that are adjacent to each other that utilize parking at different times. So a good example is, a commercial development or an office development that's adjacent to a church. They use parking at the different times, so we allow them to do that. With residential, that's really hard because it's really hard to make any rational decisions about when people are going to need parking and when they're not from a residential standpoint. And I would again say that this is, we already require on-street parking for public roads. We do have a fair amount of private roads. What generally happens in the county, particularly in the Kendall area and in Birch Bay, is you already have a development that has private roads, and you're going to have another development. And so it's sort of private road on private road on private road. If we were to have a development that was attaching to a public road system and there was connectivity, it's likely that the county engineer would require public roads, but we don't always have control over that. So usually the situation is private road off of private road. And that's how we get into this no parking situation.
And Amy, isn't there a section of the parking section that allows you to reduce parking if you're within so many feet of a transit area, or you can show that people aren't going to be walking, they're going to be using other alternatives, or aren't going to be driving?
There could be. I've never done a development adjacent to transit, so I would love that. I don't know. I can look into that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for this discussion. I tend to agree that this is more than just a code scrub, because it brings up issues that maybe we don't want to have the automobile drive our planning. Maybe we don't want to make it easier for people to use private automobiles. Maybe we need to have a driving forces to get transit out into better transit out into these areas. the people parking in emergency turnarounds and next to fire plugs, changing things for them is not too convincing to me. I'd like to see their cars towed. So, I might end up not opposing this, but it just seems like a little more than a code scrub, and maybe we could have a chance to come back and look at it and go through all the stuff that's no question about.
Okay. Number the third one. Oh, this is about public utilities regulations, and it essentially removes the requirement that smaller tanks can only be allowed for fire flow, and would allow such tanks owned and operated by a public utility, regardless of their purpose, to be permitted. So right now, these water tanks, the smaller water tanks, and that's less than 5,000 gallons and 12 feet high, are allowed, but only if they're for providing fire flow. And there are other purposes for water tanks, providing water or what have you. And we just, none of us understood why that line was in there. So we're proposing to strike that line. Any questions? No. Okay. 4 is revising the definition of non-industrial buildings to include other non-industrial uses. So currently the definition of non-industrial buildings, and this only applies in the industrial district, that's the only place it's used, are just public uses and restaurants and cafes. But there are other types of buildings that go into the high impact industrial, office building or something like that. And the setbacks are quite big. They're like 300 feet or something. And so it does allow non-industrial buildings to have smaller, more typical setbacks for those types of uses. But it only allows, it only specifically calls out public uses and restaurants. So staff has requested that we amend the definition to basically be anything that other than an industrial use. Then they can enjoy use the smaller setbacks, which seems appropriate for land use and not consuming all the land we have for setbacks. Okay, I'm seeing no questions there. 5 is adding a definition of self-service facility, or self-service storage facility, and standardizing the various terms for that type of facility, and adding it as an allowed use in the light industrial district. So here's some examples. We have different zones, call them different things. We just like to have them all be called the same thing. We got the definition from the RCWs. It's what the state uses. So we're proposing to change that definition and not change where they're allowed or anything other than we noticed that they are not allowed in light industrial, and that's one of the primary areas in most jurisdictions where these mini storages are used. So we're proposing that they be allowed there. So that's all that, and there's the definition.
If I do have a question on it, and it's not so much the definition or the wording, but I'm, we haven't done a sub-area comprehensive plan update for Birch Bay for quite a while, but I remember with our last one of allocating property that to fill in the population. But we're watching the self-storage take over much of the residential property.
Yeah, same thing was happening up in Point Roberts.
Yes. And so, gosh, they have these really nice garages that you can buy outright. They're about 40 feet long. You can put a full motorhome in and your boat and all kinds of things. I would love one of those. But I know it's going in on a lot of the residential property. And
On residential?
going east up Alderson Road, we have a project that has gone in there and they had to buy a piece of property to run their utilities on. And when the last comprehensive plan update for that sub area went in, the theory is that you take the next developer starts where the water and sewer ends and they extend it and develop, and then the next property goes onto that and they extend and develop. And what we're ending up with is these big storage facilities in the middle of that, so that the housing that goes in on the far side of the storage unit has to pay more money to get the utilities to them. So it's probably something we should look at for the future. But since we're on this and we're talking about all the different zonings that could and could not have mini storage units.
Well, you said you saw them going into residential districts?
Well, so what?
Because right now they're only allowed in small town commercial,
Right.
the RCG, general commercial, and neighborhood commercial.
Sure, and I understand it's there at the corner and such, but I know on the other side across the street from it, it's zoned R24. I believe it's the only R24 in all of Whatcom County, in the county, not the municipalities. And we're, anyway, we're having that issue, and the developer that put in, I think it's called Hidden Lake, and he's finally started building the houses. They end up buying, to make the project viable, they bought another piece of property and then ran utilities in from the back across a different piece of property because they're having the problems with that. And so when you're doing a mini storage, you're not even, there's, for the most part, no utilities needed as far as water and sewer. So they don't have to extend anything. But if it was the community grocery store or the mini mart or things like that, they have to have those amenities. But the storage units do not. All they need is electricity. And so the utilities aren't extending. So just bringing that up, I don't think it affects what we're doing tonight, but it is an issue.
Huh, yeah, it sounds like playing a game of Risk where you cut off your neighbors. Okay. Number 6. This is essentially just to allow HVAC systems within the front, rear, and side yard setbacks. Currently, the utilities are allowed, septic systems, propane tanks, etc., but it doesn't mention anything about HVAC systems. And somebody raised the issue that these, what do you call them, the heat, the new systems that
Heat pumps.
Heat pumps, that's it. Thank you. A lot of people are putting in heat pumps these days, and that's kind of the preferred method for heating and cooling your house that we're trying to encourage. So we're proposing that those also be allowed in the front, rear, and side yards. And in talking with the fire marshal, he's fine with it as long as they're placed adjacent to the primary structure and extending no more than 3 feet into the side and rear yards. That way they can still get ladders up if need be. If say they have a 5-foot setback, I can put it up against the fence or whatever and still get up there. Make sense? Okay. Number 7, this is to revise the number.
Sorry, I have a question.
I apologize, Commissioner Hanson, go ahead.
Is this presuming that the house comes right up to the 5-foot setback? And that's
Well,
what the
in some places they do, not all places though.
Because I, for instance, went to a lot of trouble digging ditches to put put the unit 20 feet away from the house, which isn't adjacent to the house. But,
And probably you didn't think it made any sense that you had to be so far away, right?
well, I put it there on purpose so it'd be hidden in the shrubbery and not visible and less noisy. I did it the hard way. That's, my wife wanted it that way. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that they can be out of the way of the fire people and still be further than adjacent to the house.
Yeah, just typically though, these new HVAC or heat pump systems are put close to the house. Hopefully not under a window where it makes a bunch
And the
of.
house is close to the property line, yeah.
All right, number 7. So this is to revise the minimum lot width and depth in the URM zone. And currently, if you don't have sewer and water or transfer of development rights, here are your lot widths and depths and width of street line. And with sewer and water, you can go down, well, it essentially says you don't have setbacks right now. But so with sewer and water and TDR rights. TDR, nobody has used it in years. Nobody, there's some certificates out there, but nobody has applied to use them. We just thought that it didn't make sense that it made more sense that if you don't have sewer and water, you have these larger setbacks and building widths, et cetera. But if you do have public sewer and water, that you have a standard setbacks and building widths, et cetera. So we're proposing to do that. And remember, this is in the URM, so it's the more urban zones.
Commissioner Masseri?
Yeah, in your note, you say that they shouldn't list 0 feet or at A. Still has a 0 at the end of on the minimum depth category there on the first line. Is that correct?
That's a good point. Amy, what do you think about that?
I have not noticed it. I mean, we can put a minimum mean depth. I was just trying to see if I could get to the code fast enough to see what it says. We could certainly put a minimum. And again, these are minimums also. They are not maximums. So we can look into that.
So this 25, 25, 40, and 50 we copied from one of the other zones. And we could certainly find out what it is in that zone and put that there. I think that'd be a good thing to do.
Oh, Cliff, I have a question for you and Amy. So this is one of our group. Are you saying that you would like to pull this one and come back with this later?
Number 7?
Yes, when you're talking about needing to change the minimum mean depth.
I think that between Amy and me, we could try to find what it should be. While Amy can do that while I continue on. How's that sound?
Okay, thank you, Cliff.
Yep. All right, 8 is a policy change, and that's to include a requirement that garbage collection service providers review and approve proposed garbage enclosures. Evidently, we've been getting complaints from the folks that pick up garbage that, you know, we will approve a site plan and where the garbage goes, but then they can't get their trucks in very well. So we just thought it might be a good idea to have them review them and approve where they go so that they can ensure that the trucks can serve the area. Okay, makes sense?
Commissioner Masseri, I believe that's a question.
Yeah, are the service providers on board, and do they have a process in place or to adequately do this and timely? And
They're on board. In fact, they're the ones that talked to Mark about this and asked that we do something about this. Whether they have a process in place, I don't know.
yeah, want to make sure that there's consistency between the different service providers as well, so.
Oh.
Because we made sure that there was something in place before we changed this, and then people go to apply and then they never hear anything back from the companies.
So,
Good point.
Commissioner Van Dalen, go ahead.
Just speaking from experience, I've run into this in different jurisdictions, and you give a lot of leeway to one company over another one. So what Dominic is saying is really, because one will just dictate the size, and it just, based on what? That's the question that I question. We're kind of opening a can of worms, as I see it, without some direction on a standardized this or that, because any of these can be all kinds of different sizes, and all of a sudden you're told to build something 30 feet wide instead of 20 feet wide or 24 or whatever. I'm just throwing that out there. I've run into that before.
Commissioner Masseri, did you have your hand up? No. Commissioner Bartel.
Want to echo the same concerns and take you a little further out of it. Just having a public entity, make a choice just seemed a lot safer, if you will, definitely more consistent in a lot of ways, just in my mind. And maybe if we worked with the garbage providers to provide the template of what they're looking for, and I know we kind of have stuff like that. So I don't know, in the city of Bellingham, I've seen that type of stuff. But anyways, I like the idea that still having a lot of public oversight as opposed to the individual companies.
And I'll speak, and I concur with Commissioner Bartel, and I not wanting to identify who it is, but we've had a real problem in our area where the garbage company makes the most money by doing the least amount of work. And it's true for all of us. And so we've had a real problem with the garbage service and where the receptacles are left. And particular thinking afterwards, and at our place, they're left in the road. And it took me a couple of years to get them of complaints, calling them regularly to get them to put the garbage receptacles back on the property. And they kept saying, we don't get paid to put it on the property. Yeah, but you do get paid not to leave it in the driving lane. And so, and I got to experience that they're not, they're interested in what gets them done the quickest. So I concur with those that suggest perhaps having the garbage companies give a template for what they need to be able to provide service rather than being able to approve where that service pickup will be.
Okay.
But I think we're done there, Cliff. Go ahead.
All right. Number 9. So 9 is a proposal to reduce our standard parking stall size down to 9 by 18. Right now it's 10 by 20. Most jurisdictions have moved to 9 by 18 because most cars have shrunk. Yes, there are some large trucks around still, and people can still, businesses can still provide larger ones if they cater more to large trucks, but kind of like a lot along the lines of what Commissioner Lund said earlier, trying to reduce parking and the pavement, et cetera. This will go a long way to that. So I've changed all the different references to it and included a new table and graphic as to how to interpret it.
Commissioner Bartel.
I just can't thank you enough. This has been something that bothered me for a long time. I had a piece of property in the Bellingham urban growth area, and the incompatibility with the county code and the city and trying to phase in a development was just beyond irritating. So to get them closer on the same page, which
Yep.
it does, it's got to be a win for everyone in those zones. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments or questions on that one? Okay.
Yeah, just a quick gratuitous, maybe we make these smaller, there'll be more encouragement for people to leave their darn truck out on the farm or the ranch and drive into town to go shopping with their car.
There you go. If you remember in the 2021 code amendments, we worked on the rural forestry district a bit. Council changed the permitting requirement for alteration and removal of trees more than 20% of the lot from a conditional use to a variance. And that's the language that they adopted. Unfortunately, we didn't realize that that same requirement for CUP was doubly listed in another section. So we're just trying to clear that up by getting rid of 163 there. It was kind of said the same, slightly different in two different places, and we didn't catch that at that time. So this is making it consistent with what you recommended and council approved at the last go round. Okay. So this is probably one of the bigger policy changes, and this comes from the council's Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They requested that that we adopt bicycle parking facility requirements. And so I worked with them on these. They did approve them as they're shown here. And it's mostly in, in large structures, large buildings where there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of bicycles. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't apply to single family or two family residential. So we talk about about short-term bicycle parking and long-term bicycle parking, and it explains the difference. And it allows for a reduction in vehicle parking spaces when you're doing this. It requires some bicycle racks that people can actually lock up to, and they don't, impede pedestrian access. And that's essentially it. But yeah, you guys have read this. I don't want to read every single line, but what do you guys think about this?
Commissioner Martell?
I was generally in favor of it. I did notice the reduced spacing, which kind of, on one hand, fits in with where we're going, but going back to the guest parking from before, it kind of left me like, are we reducing or giving too much ability to reduce? Or I'm just bringing it up, so to speak. I don't have a real good answer. I think until some of these developments happen and we see what happens with the reduced parking, we'll find out if people are parking in front of the fire hydrants to make up for reduction or not.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Go ahead, Cliff.
Number 12 is, and there's no policy changes in this whatsoever, but it's standardizing and simplifying our ADU language and regulations. Right now, each of the zoning districts has, allowed, or not each, but a lot of the residential zoning districts allow them, but it uses different language. It varies between zones, and it's just kind of difficult to deal with when the regulations aren't synchronized. So we're proposing to pull all those individual sets of regulations out from the various zones and put them just all in one place, the supplementary requirements, We've mimicked what they say for each of the zones. So there's, slight differences if you're in the rural forestry district or the ag district or in the Lake Whatcom watershed overlay district, et cetera. But other than that, they're all the same exact rules, just in one place. I do want to point out, though, that the other day when we were going over this, we did catch one error. We missed that in the rural residential I district, it talked about the minimum parcel size 2 ways in 2 different places. We only saw it in the one. So we are recommending that we change what is that? 28910 3D to read in the rural residential island district, the minimum lot size for attached accessory dwelling units is 4.5 acres, and for detached accessory dwelling units, 10 acres, and then reflect that here in the chart as well. Questions about this or comments?
Cliff, I have a question for you. So you talked about standardizing.
Yep.
With other, some of the other government agencies, the cities. Were there any actual changes to the standards? It sounds like you're cleaning it up so it's easier to understand.
Yeah, so again, through these miscellaneous code amendments, we try not to take on big policy issues. And so we've left the rules the same, really just moved the language around so it's all in one place, and that it's all, so the rules are the same in each zone with these limited exceptions. There are differences in what the minimum lot size shall be. I'll show you a chart I had.
And that's fine, Cliff. And I appreciate it. But that was just a question. I just wanted to make sure we weren't doing a change.
Yeah, no, I think going to a new system or starting to compare it to other jurisdictions and what they do, I think that would be more of a big policy thing. And we could do that eventually. Right now, we're just trying to clear this up. So this chart shows the zones in which they're currently allowed and what the requirements are. And you'll see that there are 13 standards in some, 12 standards in other, but they're basically 9 in one of them. And here's a comparison of all what those requirements are. So we went through, made a matrix, figured out where it's slightly different so that we could at least make the language the same, but on the big policy issues within that language, keep it as it is for now until we do a wholesale change of all of our ADU requirements.
I think you can go to the next one, Cliff.
Okay. 13 is adding some language to Title 22 that authorizes securities. So throughout our code, it requires that people post bonds or other types of securities, letters of credit, et cetera, to make sure that work is done or to make sure that it's done correctly. But we didn't have any language authorizing that. So I put together some language that does authorize us to collect securities, spells out what they are, standardizes the length they should be and how much they should be, and how they get reduced, how long they should last, what the security agreement contains, what administrative costs could be charged, and how the county uses those security funds if they go default on something or if they don't do something.
Cliff, what page are you on there?
This is on page 33.
Thank you.
Yep.
Interesting, online it's page 47.
Yeah, page 48.
Yeah, 47.
Oh, yeah, we made them
It
bigger.
starts on 47 and it goes to 48.
Bars. Thank you.
How is it you guys have different page numbers?
We talked about this, we enlarged it for the packet.
Oh, that's right. I can't tell you what page numbers anymore.
We got it.
Commissioner Bartel, go ahead.
On page 50, number 10, security agreement, letter E. I'm just maybe a little cautious. It says irrevocable license to run with the property to allow employees, etc. So when I hear irrevocable, I mean, that obviously just means during the life of this security agreement,
Correct.
not
Yeah.
ever.
Right. And that's what, yeah, the security agreement would say how long it lasts for.
Commissioner Masseri?
Yeah, I have a question. It's starting at the beginning, just number 2. It reads, for this section, the term director shall mean either the planning and development services, but then there's no or anything after that.
Oh, because originally, sorry, we need to take the either out then. Originally, it included the public works director in it. We were going to try to work with public works because they also collect securities for various works. But they decided that they didn't want to do that through this mechanism. So they're going to handle it themselves in their own way. So good catch on that one. But, you know, frankly, I don't even think we need to now that I think about it, because we define director in Title 20 and 22. Okay, anything more on this one?
Go ahead, Cliff, move to the next one.
Okay. 14 is just clarifying the obligations of property owners, occupants, and applicants for development activities. So in general, most codes kind of spell this out. Ours doesn't. And basically, we're just saying that it's owners, occupants, or applicants' obligation to show how they meet the code when applying for permits, to provide accurate information, and to grant access to the subject property for inspection when we have to go out and look at things. It's implied throughout, but it doesn't say it. So we're suggesting this language here.
Commissioner Hanson?
When you come up with these whole new sections of language or subsections of language, do you have to compose those on your own? Do you have other sources where you can see what other jurisdictions have done to make these languages strong and legal, et cetera?
I generally go to 3 to 5 other jurisdictions and see how they've done it. This one in particular, Mark Personius sent to me and said, include this in this. So he came up with this language. I didn't specifically. Else?
Go on to the next one, Cliff.
Okay. And this is another one from Mark. He wanted to put in here that, just a caveat that, there are timeframes for issuing permits under the state, and we comply with that. And, that carves out time that the applicant is doing things, et cetera. But we just wanted to put into the code that if we don't issue one within the specified timeframes, that it's not considered an approval of your project. With the one exception for wireless service facilities, which the state or the federal government kind of trumps us on. Good to go?
Go ahead.
Okay, number 16 is one that some council members asked us to look into. We mentioned earlier the transfer development rights program that we adopted years ago, but It really is not used. There was a project in the last year or so where they wanted to use it to get additional units in the Chuckanut area. So the council asked us, can we just say that you can only use if you're transferring densities, transfer them into UGAs where densities belong and not into other rural areas. So that's what we've put together here. Doing this kind of caused me to add another purpose in there, and that's to protect rural character by better concentrating densities in cities and urban growth areas. And then this is all just rejiggering the text to make it read a little bit better. And then this is the actual policy that for receiving areas, the area has to be within a UGA. The rest of this comes from our current regulations, basically. But yeah, that one thing, this is the major policy change in here. The rest is just moving text around and making it read a little clearer. That make sense to folks?
So thank you. You can go ahead, I think, to the next part.
Okay, I think this is the last one. And we just got done with those watershed overlay district amendments. And if you recall, we clarified the language under the seasonal clearing activity limitations. And I was trying to make the same changes we made to Lake Whatcom language, where we had the same language in the water resource special management areas, make it read the same. We missed this part of it. And it doesn't change anything. It just makes it read a little better so that people, applicants and Mike can better understand. So same change we made in those the watershed overlay district amendments, just missed one. And that was the last one. So I think it's over to you, Mr. Chair, for commission discussion.
So we had the presentation and we are scheduled for a public hearing. So Tammy, would you go ahead?
Sure, let me just look, see if we have attendees before I begin the preamble.
And I'll say I'm opening the public meeting, so it's on tape.
Okay, and we do not have any attendees at this time. And I did look at our Zoom feed, and the only one watching is me. So I don't think anyone will join at this time.
So we have
No attendees.
that being said, I'll close the public hearing. It's the pleasure of the commission. Commissioner Lund.
I might have missed it, but I don't know if Amy was able to find
Oh, yeah.
that replacement for the 0 that we had in the minimum lot width and depth.
Yeah, I was quickly scrolling through the zones. I believe that the first section of that, the URM, all districts without public water and sewer, was replicated after the UR zone without public water and sewer, which makes sense. And that last number should be 100 feet mean depth instead of 0.
me. Commissioner Masseri?
Yeah, on policy 8 with the garbage disposal collection approval, it seemed like there was some agreement on the commission that we were a little hesitant on that. It seemed like you guys were taking some notes on it. Do we need to do anything formal on that, or are you guys gonna review that further, or?
To me, it seems like an administrative thing that we have to set up a process. If the commission and council, agrees that we should let them do that, I agree that there should be some sort of process formalized. So we'll have to work on that. Whether you want us to do that first or not, I guess it kind of depends on whether council finally approves something like this. If they don't, then we don't need to.
So, Cliff, the question I have procedurally is, we're doing this and we put it out as a code scrub to go to the planning commission. And it would seem to me if we approved it without making those changes, or by leaving it in the way it is, that we're, so to speak, endorsing it, or saying we endorse it, or we're saying it's important enough that it had to go through the planning commission. But then it almost sounds like we're feeling it's okay to change it after the fact. And, but
I was gonna say, you have several options here, right? I mean, you can, just like any other code that comes to you, the planning commission can make a recommendation to the council to, that it should be adopted. If you think it's something that exceeds what a code scrub should be, you can certainly pull that. If you think there's more policy issues around it, we can certainly pull it. If you think it's something that needs more work, we can either come back with this code script, or we can pull that individual piece out and deal with that separately. So you have lots of options here.
yeah, so Cliff, my question is somebody had some good language about the sanitary service providers providing templates for what they want. Are we able to here insert some language that would do that and take out their approval, but replace it with, they will provide templates that developers can use to properly site their refuse containers?
Well, my understanding from Mark was that it wasn't the issue of what size they are, or we already have rules about that they have to be screened and all that kind of stuff. It was the location that was difficult for them, getting trucks in certain areas. And this is for the big dipsty dumpsters, not just your little trash cans.
Commissioner Masseri?
How does Bellingham or the other jurisdictions deal with this? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. We can certainly find out though.
Commissioner Hanson?
Well, when SSC decided they didn't want to go down our alley anymore and in the lettered areas, they told us we better put them out on the street if we want them picked up.
Right, that's for individual trash cans, right? Not the big dipsty dumpsters.
Oh, yeah.
This really has more to do with the big dumpster areas you see in multifamily or commercial areas.
Yeah, well, in some regards, it's even probably more important for the county to make sure that we've got a consistent policy, because there are more than one provider.
I agree. I don't know that needs to be in code, though. It just needs to be an administrative thing a process that we work out with them.
Commissioner Hanson, did you have more questions?
Well, I'm still not really disposed to vote for 8, which is amendment number 2. It seems like that's at least philosophical issue, if not policy issue. And I wonder if this disposal locations, regulations or standards might also be something that could be worked over and brought back with more detail, and then perhaps we could pass everything else as being procedural and just hold those two, if people agree with me, and come back to them next week or something.
Hang on 1
2 weeks.
second. I know in other parts of the code, not the land use code, in chapter 8, I think there's some things that address some of this stuff.
Yeah, Cliff, you got it in there. Is 810 is health code that addresses some of this.
Yeah, there it is. So, yeah, it talks about single family residential garbage collection, residential recycling, non-residential, multifamily garbage collection. It's the middle of documents and notice. And let me see if that, what that does. Now this really is all about how the companies have to operate if they're going to operate in this county and raise fees if they don't do that. Let's see. Don't see standards for things in there. All right. All right, so I've heard from a couple people that we maybe want to pull this and work on a little bit more.
Commissioner Lund, go ahead.
Sorry, I was a little premature. I have another topic to bring up, so I'll hold comment for now until we've settled 8.
I've seen a commissioner or two say that they would like to pull this for feedback. Commissioner Hanson, Commissioner Jefferson. Go ahead, Commissioner Jefferson.
My apologies, I hit that on accident.
Commissioner Hanson.
I'm sorry, I neglected to lower my hand, but I guess my point is if there are a couple areas where there's room for more discussion, I just suggest we consider pulling them and adopting the rest en masse.
So Cliff, I would say pull that one, and I think there's actually 2 of them, but specifically the one with about the sanitary services concurrence with the plans that needs maybe a little bit of rework on that.
All right, and just realize that without the amendments, the text all in black is still existing text. So we still require that they be screened, that they be, put in and everything, but we just wouldn't have any input from service providers.
Commissioner Lund.
Well, my other suggestion dovetails with my comment earlier to staff about section 2 and the policy change for overflow parking requirements. And I think that needs more thoughtful consideration. And so I feel pretty strongly that we should pull that for the code amendments tonight and come back to that. I was looking through that report that I was looking at earlier. that was put out in tandem with the City of Bellingham, Whatcom County Health Department, the National Association of Realtors, Port of Bellingham, WTA. So it's a very local generated report and there's some inconsistencies. So I think we should just kind of make sure we're moving forward in what the vision is for parking in the county.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Thank you. I would like actually to ask Commissioner Lund if she could share that report with me, or with all of us. Also, I agree with holding back on number 2. I do think more needs to be addressed before we go further with that one.
I'll send it to Tammy and Tammy can send that out to the commission. Does that work, Tammy?
That works.
Thank you both.
Does somebody want to make a motion? We seem to have concurrence on 2. And then I think there's some interest in waiting on 8. Commissioner Bartel.
I would attempt to make the motion to accept as written here in the miscellaneous and amended throughout the process tonight, the miscellaneous code amendments that were, with the exception of 2 and 8, and the finding of facts. Anything else I need to add?
That was great.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will not try to directly quote Commissioner Bartel. Is there-
With that motion, are we sending the whole packet through saying we've approved of all of them other than 2 and 8? Or does that motion actually hold those 2 back, which I think is what we were discussing doing?
I believe the motion was that we approve it with the findings, with the exception of 2 and 8.
So they will be held, they won't be set with a non-approval.
They won't.
I think that's a good assumption. I don't think we'd want to move them forward without working through them with you guys.
Well, and I actually spoke out of turn because staff could take that along if they so choose, but I assume that they would not want to do that.
I have to defer to Steve on that, but that'd be my guess.
Yes, we would take the commission's recommendation, which is everything except for 2 and 8, to the council. Knowing that 2 and 8 needs some additional conversation and working. with the commission. So I would like that. That work? That's how I understood the motion.
That's
Oh, I understood it.
But I think it was a valid question.
I was just confirming. Yeah,
I think that's right.
Do we have any discussion on the motion? Or comments on the motion? Tammy, would you read the motion back and then call the roll?
Okay, so the Commissioner Bartel moved to accept miscellaneous code amendments with the exception of, as written by staff, with the exception of 2 and 8, which will not be sent, and to accept finding of facts. In fact, I'll have to, Dermot will give me rewording that a little bit.
Yes.
I was writing fast.
And that would also cover any of the, like the 100 feet, the little incidental changes we made tonight in the way you worded it.
So, the code amendments as amended. Well, that is,
Yes, I think Amy took care of that.
so, Commissioner Lund,
Approve?
Commissioner Sari,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Dalen,
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes,
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes,
Commissioner Jefferson,
Yes.
Commissioner Barton.
Yes.
That is 7 yeses, that carries.
Great, thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Bartel.
Just wanted to throw out some mega thank yous for the report tonight. It was just so organized, very easy for me to understand. I didn't have to jump around and try to figure out what other resources I need to look for. Flowed really well, just can't say enough. So well done. Thank you all.
Nice work, Cliff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, I just say, I think there was a lot of good changes in here, so I appreciate that.
Okay, is there any other business tonight, commissioners? Commissioner Jefferson.
I wanted to interrupt earlier, but we had already started on this last portion of, I needed to abstain on that last vote, not on the last vote, on the minutes. So, and I did send Tammy a message, but I want to get that on record. I wasn't at that meeting. I read the minutes, but I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jefferson.
Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Way to go, everybody. Thanks so much. Staff is awesome.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.